Me too.
Gregory, are
All
you
this
not,
positive, yeah.
It just feels
Gregory, are you not in the valley today?
I'm actually live on the Long Beach Peninsula in Southwest Washington.
Ah.
Cool.
Yeah, so
I
I'm
had pictured you as being in Polk County, but no, that's obviously wrong.
I'm in Pacific County, Washington, which is southwest. So it's across the bridge in Astoria.
Yeah.
But I'm from the valley, native Oregonian, again, like born in Silverton and grew up in Molalla. And then I went to Portland State and lived in Portland a lot. And then, of course, did career service with state police in Oregon for 29 years.
Well, I've been in Long Beach, but not in a long time.
Yeah, I'm north of there. I'm as far as you can go, really. And I mean, it's paradise. It takes a while to get here, but it's nice. It's very quiet.
Hi, Connie.
Very quiet.
Hi, Connie.
Long Beach is good too, though.
Okay,
Hi,
Greg.
Connie.
Everybody.
You want to get us underway, Mr. Greg?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to the first conversation of March for the month of March. And I think as we start today, I'd like for us to focus our minds for our conversation first about kind of to start with the sincere recognition and appreciation of the places and the lands that we most go to or spend time in our daily living. And it's where we're perhaps currently sitting, the place where we work, the place where we break bread and maybe even lay down our head to rest, which is our home. Those spaces and places are probably some of the most personal, spiritual, and sacred in your life, right? It certainly is for me here where I am in the Long Beach Peninsula. And I just want us to be really mindful and appreciative that the lands where these spaces are were once occupied by Native and Indigenous people. And if you haven't done so, I would invite you to learn who was here before us, who lived on this land, what did they do, how did they work the land, how did they live on this land that we live now. Obviously, there's a racial connection to this because the Indigenous Native people were exploited to a large degree. But it's important for us to, very important for us to, I think I invite you to get on this map, put in your address and learn where your land came from, where your space is. My story is that I put my address in and it's what I thought, but I learned a lot more by doing this. And it's the Chinook tribe. And they were the people that first lived this land. And I discovered from that there's a place where on the other side of the Columbia River where I can go. I plan to go once the weather breaks a little better, and I'm going to hike that area and go to the point where they signed the treaty on the Columbia with the U.S. government about how they were going to live and work together. And then what I learned in that research, and it just still only took like half an hour, is that the U.S. government never ratified that treaty. The tribes thought that they had. They didn't. And today, the Chinook tribe still is seeking federal recognition. It's a sad story, but it's fascinating and it's sacred. So I'm looking forward to doing a hike to that location. And I just think that me anyway, I feel so much more enriched and I feel more appreciative of the space where I live and where I call, my little piece of paradise. To know who lived here first. So I commend that to you. And then today, I'm not sure I get back to my share here. Hold on. That was good. So the link is in there, correct?
Yes,
Lori?
and I will include it in the summary.
Excellent. Good. It's pretty cool and easy to do. And it's informative. It's nice.
Yes, Carol, and you're right. Stolen land is another interactive where you punch in your.
That's right. Oh, is that what it's called? Stolen land? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Today's topic, though, is about microaggressions. And I don't know if you've heard that term before, but it's been pretty popularized recently. It's actually an older term. And it's about, I hope today we have time in our discussion to define it and to identify the different types of microaggressions and the messages that they convey, and then understand the linkage between microaggressions and health, personal health. There's a really important linkage there, and it's been found to be supported by the recent science on that. But first, think of a time when someone hurt you, that dismissed you or treated you rudely. And perhaps it was because of something to do with your identity, something about you, something the way you portrayed yourself. But think of that time where you were dismissed or treated rudely by another person because of some aspect of who you were or are. And think about how you felt at the time. And perhaps more important, how do you feel about it today? How do you feel about it today? And that part is an important linkage that we'll discuss later. How do you feel about that? What happened to you today? Okay, so today the topic is fun for me because it's not complicated. And it's about thinking. It's about pausing and slowing down to think, pause, and respond to others when we're engaging them. It's about learning and seeing life in full color, being fully multicultural. It's about being culturally sensitive. It's about practicing that empathy we talked about. And it's about being humble and kind, always. And the topic is fun in that I know by the time we're done today with our conversation is that you are going to, learning will have occurred, change will be happening, and you'll be so much more self-aware. And because we all do, just like biases, we all tend to make and do some microaggressions by accident because many of them are unintentional. I did one today earlier. And it's like, I don't know if they noticed it, but I did afterwards because I'm so self-aware. The definition, what's a microaggression, is that it is a brief, commonplace, daily verbal, behavioral, maybe environmental indignity. Could be intentional, could be unintentional, but it communicates hostility, derogatory, negativity. It's an insult, it's a slight. Okay. Is there anything that stands out to you with that definition? To anybody? And feel free to put any of your comments as we go along in the chat or come off mute. Is there anything that stands out or strikes you with that? And it's interesting that one of the really profound researcher on the issues of microaggression and social scientist, psychologist is from Portland, and he's Asian. Done a lot of work on this.
It's a pretty broad category, Greg.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Rich, I'd like to ask, clarify environmental indignity.
Yeah, good. What is that?
Environmental.
Yeah, how is it
And
environmental?
what is that?
Yeah, that's great. Rich, perfect question. Environmental microaggressions and indignities, look at the history of racism as it relates to redlining. Look at the history of racism currently today in Kent. Is it Kent?
Mhm.
Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan with the water.
Mm-hmm.
The neighborhoods of
Mhm. Okay.
So it's environmental policies that have been made perhaps due to racism.
Hmm.
And the Flint
Okay.
there's well, not to use probably the word micro, but there are other examples of water supply and water where it's not very safe, or there's pollution, or there's, people, some of the best housing that could be affordable for some people of color was on top of a landfill. And it radiates radiation and gas, you know, around this country. And that's the environmental piece.
I have trouble with the whole definition because to me, I would take off the micro.
Okay.
I think when we're talking about now, maybe unintentional, but when we're, and what I've been listening to, when I hear microaggressions, it's more like when people are othering other people.
Uh-huh.
Like when you would say, oh, that's what does that name mean?
Uh-huh.
And we wouldn't say that to like, oh, Sharon, oh, your name is Sharon, cool. And then, but we'd say, oh, your name is, and then and say, well, what does that mean? To me, it's like something that immediately others separates.
Yeah.
That, and it's like a little pick that you're not on the team, kind of.
Yes. Yes. And Bobby, I just love it when you give your thoughts on the things you're learning and whatnot. Because it's a great segue, the pick. It's like being hit over and over and over with some people that are in certain identities, can be racial, can be other things. They have this happen to them all the time. Pick. They get fed up with it. That's right. I mean, as we go forward, you'll see these where it has the personal health impact on people of color, racial microaggressions, because it happens over and over. So, and we'll get to that. That's why I start off with asking you, think of a time when someone hurt you because of who you were.
I think of a niece that is mentally challenged and how her mother just did the little, oh, you're just stupid, or you're just, you know, these little tiny, and they were subtle, they were not loud, and yet they were certainly insults. And
Yep.
you know, you tell somebody they're stupid long enough, they believe you.
That is right.
And
That's the danger. That's right. That's exactly right. And it's that pick. And that example you gave, and you're going to have some opportunities to actually identify here in a bit, is it's microaggressions, it's insults, and it's based not on race, but it's based on ability. Because disability, I'm assuming that the person has a disability or some kind of challenge there, and it's based on that. It can be based on a lot of things.
I think also,
Question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Martin, you're fine.
My screen went strange. The use of the term, I mean, the micro term, I mean, supports an inference that these are small.
Yeah.
It talks about quantity or along some sort of continuum. But you gave an example like Flint, Michigan. I mean, I have a hard time getting my mind around the notion that poisoning children with lead is low down on the continuum of things, bad things you can do to people.
Mm-hmm.
What's micro about that?
Mm-hmm. The mic, and I didn't, you know, the term is in 1970, and it was a term by a person, again, I think in the social sciences, related to the treatment that he observed of people against Black people. That's how it started. That's the genesis of the term microaggressions. And I tend to agree with you too. I've never really liked the term microaggressions. When I first heard it, it just didn't, it's like, what? The reason I believe that it's microaggressions, and that's the term that everyone's using today, is that it's pick.
I get that. I mean, the term has its place, but I don't understand. Again, you mix the environmental things in there with that. I mean, some fairly substantial.
Mm-hmm.
This example was very significant. I mean, cutting off a community's drinking water, essentially.
Right.
There's nothing micro about that.
Right.
That would
maybe
be a
the
macro.
micro piece of maybe the micro piece of it is the fact that they still have to get bottled water every day, every water, or, you know, every bit of water that they're using still. I don't know if that's micro, that's certainly major to me,
Yeah.
but they have, you know, the people in Flint still have to buy or go out and get
Right.
drinking water.
But it's just like implicit bias in making decisions on how we're going to zone land and make decisions on water. Of course, there's unethical behavior in the Michigan case, but it's all based on small things like bias. Microaggressions are all based on our conditioning and our bias toward people that are different than us.
But
That's what
I
it is.
think, okay. Yeah, I mean, I still have trouble putting what happened in Flint as a microaggression. Because I think it's working exactly as designed. I think the whole idea is to hurt people of color, push them into areas that's hard for them to thrive. And there's nothing micro about that. To me, microaggression is something that if you're not in that skin, you might not even recognize it as an aggression. If you're on the other side of the table and someone says something to a person of color, you know, you might go, whoa, but if it's a microaggression that they get all the time, that's just like these little nicks that separate them, that say you're different. To me, that's the microaggression.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's listen to some voices of people. Let's listen to the voices of some people about, making me a note. It's a great conversation, by the way. Let's listen to some voices of people that have this occur to them. And I think things will start becoming even more clear for us.
Think about a time when someone said something about some aspect of your identity that made you feel insulted or slighted. Even if they didn't intend it, you probably experienced a microaggression.
A microaggression is something that someone says to someone else without knowing that it may be offensive.
It hurts. So that's how I know it's a microaggression, because it feels disrespectful.
And it's not like outright racism, but it's something that is like almost unconscious in the way that you view people.
Most microaggressions are subtle and indirect, but they occur frequently in the daily interactions of members of historically underrepresented groups. And most often, people who commit microaggressions think of themselves as well-intentioned, non-racist, non-sexist people. They do not realize that the underlying messages communicated by their actions or comments are hurtful to other people.
One of my friends asked if my parents had their papers.
I had a science teacher, a physics teacher, and he told me that I was the smartest black girl in his class.
I've been asked if I understood what they were talking about, or like, do you need any translation and stuff just based on my name?
Like, you know, I'm not the spokesperson for the whole black community, you know, but that's a microaggression I do experience a lot. Like, they want the black perspective, and I'm usually the only black girl in the class. So it's like, okay, what's your take on this?
Oftentimes I get asked, like, do you know how to speak your native language? And when I answer I do, it's just like, they're like, okay, well, what does Ching Chao mean?
There are 3 types of microaggressions: micro-assaults, micro-insults, and micro-invalidations. A micro-assault is similar to what we think of as overt discrimination. In the case of micro-assaults, those acts are intentional.
I was a server for a long time, and if anyone else was, you know this. In the back of the kitchen, like when someone gets a table of, like, say, Indian people, I hope this is PC, I don't know all the terms, but like Indian people or black people or anyone, they'd be like, who wants that table? I don't want it, they're not gonna tip. And my heart would break every time.
I used to be a server too, and I hated it because I was like the only person of, like, you know, any type of race other than white. I remember coming in and they'd be like, oh, Danielle, you get that table of raccoons, and I was like, what? And they were like, yeah. And then I would go and I'm like, they're black people, and I was like, wait, is that what you call black people? You call them raccoons?
A micro-assault can be the deliberate posting of swastikas, Confederate flags, racial slurs or epithets that are left on a blackboard in a classroom.
I work as a research assistant, and so a while ago, one of the our new RAs, when I was a few months into it, came up to me and just mentioned that even though we'd known each other for months at that point, you know, you're the least scary black guy I've ever met. You know, in the way that I dress, the way that I talk, the way that I speak, I've kind of tailored that over the course of my education to be non-threatening.
I will literally have like my keys in my hand, like they're always with me, and I'll just like jingle them as I'm walking so that they know that I know that I'm there, so that we both know that I'm right here and I'm not gonna try and do anything to be stupid. But on that note, there's also the stigma that like we're aggressive and intimidating.
It's sad you have to make sure you let people know you're not a threat, and that's jacked up. So.
One of my friends commented to me, he said, you know, I don't really even think you're black, you know, and I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I mean, you're smart, you do your work, yes, you're athletic, but you do your work, you're smart. So I don't really know if you're black. I was like, I didn't understand. It made me question who I was and if I was still a part of the culture.
And that's an example of micro invalidation and a micro insult. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. A micro insult is a comment that communicates the demographic group is not respected, that that person is a slight exception to the stereotype. It's an insult, even though the perpetrator thinks he has just rendered a compliment.
Well, here at UNT, I've heard, you're so pretty for a black girl. I feel like it discounts me as a person, and then I feel like it discounts my race. I feel like you can be pretty just because you're a woman, or, you know, or all black women are beautiful, all people of color are beautiful, just the same as people that are not people of color. So for them to make that specific statement, that's what I'm like, what in you made you say that to me? As if it were a compliment.
One of my science classes, my teacher had asked what I wanted to do, and I told the teacher that I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And immediately they're like, that's too hard for you. Maybe you should try a different field, or have you ever thought about being a nurse practitioner? Nurse practitioners in psychiatry make pretty well, they make a lot of money too. Have you thought about that? Like, why go to med school?
Genuinely, sometimes somebody might feel like they can't make it, you know, and then when you continue to tell them that, it does hurt, you know.
Another type of micro insult is when a professor says to a student, wow, you speak really good English. The message is the professor thinks I don't really belong here, or that I'm not really American. Of course I speak good English. I was born in the United States. But the professor sees a Latina or an Asian and makes the assumption that that person is foreign, or at least that is what the target hears. What is the underlying message when somebody asks if you're legal?
That you don't belong to this country.
That you don't belong, that's right.
We were walking into the gym once, and I was a guest, so I had to hand the person my ID. And he was looking at my name and everything. He's like, what are you? And I was like, well, what are you asking? He's like, what nationality are you? I was like, okay, I'm Lebanese, I'm Arab.
He's like, you got one of those that blow things up, are you? No offense though. What kind of crazy stuff do you ask someone? You get what I'm saying?
And I was just really surprised. Like, it totally blew my mind that someone would think that.
The assumptions I get the most is that I'm very academic and that I'm very good at math. When they assume stuff like that, it makes me feel like they're taking the individual out of who I am and just assuming that all the people who look like me act like me, and that kind of makes me feel lesser of what I can do.
The teacher was asking if someone could translate something in Spanish, because he was giving an example, and he needed this one word to be translated in Spanish. And he just stared at me specifically when he was asking, and I knew we were making eye contact, because after, like, I just stayed quiet because I was like, I'm pretty sure there's other people in this class. I know Spanish, but he just kept staring at me. And at some point, like, the rest of the class turned to look at me, like, waiting for a response. And I was like, I'm not going to give you guys an answer. Like, this is not okay.
Our teacher pulled me aside because they were doing something for Christmas, like Toys for Tots or something. And he had this bicycle. They had a bicycle they were going to give to the kids. And you know, he came up to me and was like, hey, I need to switch out the seats on this bike, and it seems like somebody like you would know how to do that. So if you could just change it out for me, that'd be great. And so I was like, oh, okay, sure, you know, not really thinking much of it. And then later on, I kind of thought to myself, that's odd. Why would he assume that I knew personally how to switch, you know, a bike seat? Just, you know, so I thought that was an odd kind of maybe a micro insult on the fact that he assumed just because maybe I'm Latino that I'm good with my hands or something like that.
A micro invalidation is a comment or action that dismisses the experiences of historically disadvantaged group members. Micro invalidations can happen when, for instance, when a student is lamenting that she wishes there were more Latina faculty, for instance. And the students in the class start rolling their eyes or, oh, come on, get over it. And the professor goes along with the students instead of with the person who made the lament. Another type of micro-invalidation, one that we hear a lot about today, is being colorblind. When people say, I don't notice you're black. I don't notice you're Latina. I don't see color. What does that mean? How do you interpret that? What are people saying when they say, I don't notice your race, I don't see color? How do you interpret that?
They're just trying to say that they're not racist. That they don't look at that side of you and they just want to validate you as a person, but it comes off wrong because it's like your race is very much who you are as an individual.
I think in a broader spectrum, we'd have to get to know each other or just not make assumptions. And people don't realize that we are a lot more alike than we are different.
People say that for other people, like you're so black or you're so Mexican, you're so Asian. And to me, that takes away from who I am as a person, even though it groups and stereotypes me with other people. And I don't like when people do that.
It makes you feel like you shouldn't be who you are. You know, it makes you feel like they're basically trying to tell you that you should be doing something else. Like they're not able to accept you for the person that you are and the person you're trying to show them that you are. Instead, they're just telling you like, oh, that's not right. That's not a good fit. And I mean, nobody wants to feel that way. Everybody wants to feel, accepted for who they are, no matter, what situation they're put in.
What's your reaction to this? What are your key takeaways from this short video? What's key takeaways that you would take away? Either say it out loud or just put it in the chat box. Key takeaways. Anybody? I like where she said, we just got to get to know each other. We have a lot more in common than we have differences.
Gaylin said sadness.
Yeah. The one African-American girl that cried and was, her dream was popped in a sense by somebody saying, well, why don't you do something a little less than that? Because it comes across like, are you really capable of that? Right? Anything else?
Connie says, being aware opens eyes, then we can change.
Mm-hmm. Very good. It's also very subtle. Microaggressions are like, they can happen and you don't mean to say it that way. I did one earlier today.
Are you going to tell us what that was?
You can also do it on purpose, but that's not, I think most of us are, we don't intend to hurt, but you can do things that are just inadvertent. I may as I go forward, but I'll continue. I will say, well, first, anything else on the reaction to the video before I move on?
Good video.
I'm sorry?
It was a good video.
Good, thank you.
Carol says, people who intend to be kind, but their words are not. will more likely change if they see and hear examples like this.
Yes. And I want us to look at more
Mhm.
and do some practice on identifying them. You guys are going to do great.
Robert, you had a comment?
There's a little test I'd like to do and see how anybody feels on it. There's a boy brought into a hospital by his father, and he's wheeled into the emergency ward, and the doctor says, "I can't work on this child, it's my son." Who's the doctor?
That's a good one, Robert. I've used that one too. It's a good one. I'm going to let you take it full circle.
The doctor happens to be the mother of the child. So if you were confused as to, it shows your own bias as to doctors are always men.
Right. I don't know if you mentioned that the dad was killed in the crash, but yeah, dad was
Oh,
killed.
I didn't hear it that way. I heard it that the father brought the child into the emergency, and you know, the father can't come with the child into the operating room. So
Right. Good. Stepping back just for a moment on it, I think a better way to look at the environmental aspect of this definition of microaggressions are something that's really been prominent lately, and that's the statues that are in our environment, Confederate statues, or if you go to a city and perhaps most buildings are named after white people, not people of color. That's environmental potential microaggressions. Although I think those are still, in today's world, it's pretty sensitive issue, but that's another example of that. All right, well, let's move on down the road. Just kind of as a deeper level of understanding this concept of microaggressions, be mindful that it can be racial. We're going to focus on racial microaggressions, but it can be sexual, it can be gender-based, it can be ability or disability, it can be age, could be your ethnicity, your perceived ethnicity, and it could be you. And I put that in there, you, just because the way you come across in your life, that you present your persona in a certain way, right? And maybe people see you and they do a microaggression against just because of the way you look, the way you present yourself. You have a bunch of plaques on your wall and you're a hardworking public service worker who's been very successful, and you've been allowed and sent to trainings, and you have recognitions and you have awards and you have degrees and you have them on your wall. And somebody comes in, one of your colleagues, and looks at you one day and says, "I love your love me wall."
Ooh.
I love your love me wall. Or they say, that's quite the I love myself wall that you got going there. Yeah, somebody said, ooh. That's just based on who you are, right? But that can sting. It's like, what? I'm not trying to be, I'm proud. I've worked hard. So you saw in the video 3 types. There's microassaults, which tend to be explicit attack kind of a thing. Invalidations, which are verbal comments or behaviors that negate or discount the feelings of other people. And then insults, yeah. And that's, again, behavioral or verbal comments that convey rudeness, insensitivity, or demeaning. You know, in this case, we're talking about race pretty much. So we're going to practice with these a little bit. There's kind of a continuum where you see on the left, it's pretty conscious effort, you know, it's conscious, intentional, overt. In the middle, it's a micro insult, somewhere in between, and then micro invalidation, which is more unconscious, unintentional, and, you know, kind of hidden kind of a thing. What is this one? Your kind doesn't understand English. Anybody want to classify that one? Your kind doesn't understand English.
Ignorance.
Yeah. Do you know what type of microaggression that is?
Well, it could be either an insult or invalidation. Of course, could even be an assault depending on the context.
Right.
I think it's an assault because it's intentional.
Okay, I can't resist. It's also talking about somebody from Texas.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That Southern drawl. Yeah. Okay. What about you go into a restaurant, you're a person of color, and you're put in a less desirable spot. Or let me give you another one. You and a friend are both people of color. You get on a small, one of those planes that jumps, you know, it's a commuter plane. And you're one of the first ones on board. Stewardess says, hello, sit wherever you want. We don't have a full flight tonight. So you, two people of color, sit toward the front and you sit with the aisle between you so you can chat back and forth, right? Shortly thereafter, two white males in suits come in and they take a seat in front of you. Shortly after that, stewardess comes back and looks at you and your friend and says, would you all mind moving to the back? We need to balance out the plane. We're getting ready to close the door for departure. And you're going to be like, two white guys just walked in suits, sat down in front of us. She said we could sit anywhere we want. Now we're saying, you got to move to the back. Is that a microaggression? And if so, what kind?
It could be, but I'm a pilot, okay?
Mm-hmm. And I get the point. You got to balance out the plane. I've been there.
Yeah.
Why not balance out the plane with the first people that come on instead, or the last people that come on instead of the first ones that are told to sit where they can? It's micro invalidation.
Well, and
you're not.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
What about the person who said they're a pilot? How would?
Yeah, I'd like to hear that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I did retire as a pilot for a major airline just a few months ago. And, but when you were flying the small ones, well, then of course the weight and balance does have a bigger, much bigger effect on it. And if there's for some reason some time constraint, well, then the flight attendant should say, we've got a time constraint. It'd be easier for y'all to move. If not, then the two other guys should move. And any flight attendant who didn't do that would have very good reason, first of all, to file a complaint. Second of all, she should be reprimanded. And third of all, if there's enough of them, she should be fired.
Yeah.
Wow.
Why didn't she tell the people with the suits on to go to the back of the plane to begin with? Because they got on the plane, she must have known that it was going to be unbalanced and it wasn't a full flight.
Well, she didn't know that until they get the loading document.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why didn't she just ask for two volunteers to go to the back of the plane?
That's the only thing. The only thing I'm giving a credibility is that there could be some sort of time
constraints.
Yeah.
Right.
And that'd be the only reason.
What kind of aggression is that? Or do you believe it's a microaggression?
Yeah.
Because remember, it's not always intentional. I'm sure she didn't pick. I mean, she may have, but and this is part of where I'm leading you is, and this is why what we're doing right now is going to make the point. I believe, I hope that why this is also a health issue with people that
could be a male female thing. Maybe she didn't feel that she could tell a man what to do.
That's interesting.
Or she, I mean, it's, again, we're projecting a lot into scant data, but I could see a situation where it wasn't malice necessarily, but she thought that the two suits would be more apt to give her guff than the two people of color. They were used to being bossed around or whatever. That they might be more cooperative.
And I think even under those circumstances, Martin, it's still a micro insult.
Of course it is. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just arguing about the malice point. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah. If I may.
Okay.
If I may.
I think when it comes to a situation like that, I hear excuses as to why she would go to the other people who were settled, to people of color, and not to the people that were in the suits. And that comes off as, again, you're classifying who is more important than the other. And by doing that, you're saying, well, these people, they look like they're more important than this other group of persons, so you should be the ones to move, which is an insult, because she doesn't know who the people of color represent or who they are. They could be doctors, could be lawyers, could be whatever, could be multimillionaires. You never know. But because a person has on a certain particular outfit, the way I read it is she deemed them more important than the other people that got on the plane first.
How does this all change if the stewardess is Black?
Good question, Fred.
I think it's coming from a person who is Black, because I can only speak what I know. I think even if it came from a person who is Black, it still has the same connotation to it. You thought those people were less than. And we tend to, in the Black culture, we tend to do that. We do colorism and we do all these other things where we want to make people feel less than. And it's an insult because I don't wear fancy clothes. You see me every day, I'm probably in sweats. People probably think I'm just the worst person in the world until they take the opportunity to speak to me. And when you judge a book by the cover, you tend to miss the content that is the person. And that is what any stewardess or any pilot or any one other person does. That when they come to a person that doesn't look a certain way, they take away and try to diminish that person for who they are.
Exactly.
Okay, very, very good. Very, very good. It's a true story.
Wow.
And Professor, the person I referenced who's from Portland, Chinese origin, and the people of color, when I said this, they weren't Black. They're Chinese. And he has written and published on the topic of microaggressions. And this happened to he and his colleague. And they moved. They then were so fuming because they're tired of this, that they confronted the stewardess and said, you know, you're asking us to move. Is it because of our race? Is that racist? And of course, the steward, I didn't help. So it kind of went from there. But it's a true story. It's a true story. And here's the deal. This is one of the main points I want to leave you with today. And that is that one of the reasons why microaggressions, racial microaggressions, are so harmful physically and emotionally is because they continue. It's that, what Bobby said, pick, 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 pick. It's like being hit and hit and hit over and over. And part of the mental anguish that a person of color feels is you never know for sure. Was I just discriminated on because of what I look like? Or did she just make a mistake? Did she just, or was there something else? But when that happens to you over and over and over, somebody said it, you're told something enough, you start to wonder if it's not true, right? So one of the toxic stress triggers of microaggressive behavior of people of color is the fact that it is repetitive and you never know with any definity. It mind tricks you. It's not healthy. Causes toxic stress, excessive cortisol. We can handle some of that, but when it's kind of all the time, not good, not good. What about this one? There is only one race, the human race.
I think that's right up there with all lives matter.
Yeah, I was going to mention that one. Is what about in response to Black Lives Matter, and you've heard this, people say this, and that is, well, all lives matter. Well, that's a micro-invalidation.
Yeah.
You're invalidating what BLM is all about. They're not saying that all lives don't matter. And we've talked about this.
Have you, am I on? Oh.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
on.
you're there.
Okay.
Have you come across they're called microaggressions by the people that the videos I've been watching, but they are considered compliments. So they're given as compliments. So I don't know exactly which area of the three that you had up on the board that they would fit into.
Bobby, could you give us an example?
Yeah, some of the examples were someone calling a African American woman cis, like I got you sis, or girl, or trying to in some way almost like some language appropriation to
Right. That's what
but it comes off to the people, at least that were talking on the video, as a microaggression in their words. And also things like, oh wow, that's really colorful. And they're I don't know, I can understand all of those insults, but the category of compliments, I think that's kind of an interesting thing I'm trying to unpack by listening to these videos.
Okay.
Have you come into contact with that in your
No.
research?
No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, but I think that's a common, Bobby, example of what you hear all through the business world.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's go here.
Hi, Joe. Sorry I'm late for the call. I had a perfect morning, had to catch the last set.
You surf?
Yeah, I'm at Ocean Beach pretty much all the time. You?
Totally. We'll have to go when I'm up there next week.
Hey, I'm stoked. Epic.
Are you John? Joe? Oh, yeah. Great to meet you. I totally had you pictured different in my head.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but anyways, can I get you a cup of coffee?
Yeah, sure.
Is that a microaggression? And if so, what kind?
Ageism.
Yep, ageism.
Although that's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, as someone who worked for a state agency and was involved in all sorts of organizations, you had work acquaintances that you spoke with all the time over a long period of time and never met. And you couldn't help but form a picture of them in your mind. And it was never, ever accurate.
Yeah. Yep. And that's where it comes out potentially, where it's not, it's unintentional, but yet it's an insult.
It can be, although, I mean, again, we use the information we have to form our opinions, which affect our behaviors. And again, most of the things that we're experiencing, the unintentional ones certainly, are the results of ignorance or lack of experience. And more experience with people who are different will lessen those things.
Exactly. Good point. Excellent. Yep. The more people we experience that are different, the more we expand our multicultural lens, the more it will lessen it. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one.
I think it's also a case of the more we get to know somebody. I think about the first time I ran for office. I ran against this person and did not like her very much at the beginning. But as the campaign wore on and she beat me in the end. I came in second. I ended up being her campaign manager in the fall. She became a lifelong friend. She's gone long many years now, but I still miss her. And so sometimes it's a case of somebody that you see. So it's not a case of like, oh, you look different than what I imagined. It's a case of you are different than what I imagined or what my first take was.
Right.
And so, so I think that enters into it too.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
My hair looks crazy. It looks like a mess.
I don't believe it. Your hair always looks awesome. I mean, how do you do it? Do you twist it? Do you do it yourself?
Yeah, I twist it myself.
Oh. I mean, do you mind? Oh.
Yeah, actually, I do mind.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean, if you're really curious about it, there are like tons of YouTube videos out now about natural hair, so maybe check that out.
There's no way we were gonna make it to that date.
No. I have no idea what they were thinking. What do you do this weekend?
Going to the beach with some buddies.
Dude, sunscreen. You've already got quite the tan. Where's your family from?
Here.
Yeah, but before here, where are they from?
Still here.
But before that?
A few generations from here.
Cool. Sorry.
That's a real common one there. Where are you from? Where are you from? Let's talk about go a little deeper on microaggressions and health and toxic stress. The research shows that microaggressive behavior, racial microaggression behavior, produces things like anger, frustration, mistrust, negative self-esteem, toxic stress reaction over time, because it happens over and over and over, which that's what triggers cortisol. And the research shows what's interesting is that the negative impacts of microaggressions is actually greater than overt forms of racism. So to be more explicit about it is one thing, but when it just like, it's that I don't know, Dr. Sue would say, I don't, you live your life not knowing if you're always being constantly dissed because of the way you look, because of your ancestry. So it produces this stress experience. And is it any wonder why perhaps people of color suffer from some health impacts? Diabetes, heart disease, the ones that cortisol tends to trigger. It's why many jurisdictions in this country are calling racism a public health issue. Public health issue. Oregon has not declared that. Washington has, and many states and many cities have declared that because they're making that connection. They impair performance, they sap the psyche and the spiritual energy of people that have it happen.
The heart is a muscle inside your body. It bumps. It's a shape that means love. Like if someone kicks you or pushes you, it goes like that.
You're so rude and dumb.
A lot of people hate you. You are ugly. Your parents are ugly. You are dumb. Your friends barely even like you anymore. You're stupid.
You're stupid. Nobody cares about you.
Oh, this is hard. Oh, you're ripped a little bit. You are nice to people. I like you. Very, really
sorry. When all those scars are there, you can't make them disappear.
This heart has scars in it.
It's still very wrinkly. It never worked because there's still all these scars in it.
Scars of the heart. When we have a heart attack, you have a heart attack, the lack of oxygen can cause scar tissue, which is not healthy. And just like in that video, similarly to bullying all the time of young children, it scars their heart. And you can maybe repair that to some degree, but you can never take all the wrinkles out as it was before. And you know that. Think back to the first question I asked you tonight, and that was, think of a time when somebody dissed you, insulted you to where it really hurt because of who you were, who you are. It's hard to flatten out that heart afterwards. So my point is we need to be mindful of this when it relates to racism and racial disses, many of which, like the stewardess, she probably didn't intend to do what she did, but she did, and it adds on. It's a cumulative effect. And we're all familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elements for creating success and ability to thrive starts off with physiological, breathing, food, water. You've got basic needs met, and then you've got safety, the security of your place, your employment, resources, family. And then it goes up to love and belonging, and it goes up, right? And you need one to do the other. If a person is constantly subjected to racial microaggressions, is it any wonder why they struggle being successful and reaching full flight? If they're denied things, or if they've had a history in their family lineage of having opportunity and power denied, and you have these constant things happen, they hear, but not sure if was that a diss? It adds up and can be really harmful. What about this? I know you all heard things about that. What did people say about that?
It took some work to put that up.
Yeah, it did. Brave work.
Yeah.
But people responded. Say that again, Fred?
There was a lot of cheering when it went up.
Yeah, yeah. And that's great. But there was microaggressions surrounding that, I bet.
There was.
Yeah. Yes, there was. I live here in Dallas.
Let Carol talk. Darcy
Okay.
doesn't know the full story.
Okay.
What?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Darcy.
Okay. Well, being a Dallas person with the sign there, the Celebrate Black History, I loved it. The beauty of it, the names and everything on it. But the way it came across in the community to me was that nobody wanted it. They were going to put it across Main Street. They couldn't because of it being a main thoroughfare and a highway. I mean, it's just everything that this young lady had done to get this done, and part of our church raising money for it too. And then it was just put aside. Oh no, you can't do that. And it's very disheartening to me to see that of the way it was disrespected in a way. There were people that were very happy, but there was a lot of people that weren't. And it's still going on to this day in our community. I mean, it's gotten a lot really sad this last week.
I'm sorry, I haven't heard any, is it on a Facebook page or something? Because there's no link to the editor or anything, I don't think.
It's very on the Dallas Facebook pages, David. There's 2 or 3 of them, and people have been making pretty severe comments.
There's some interesting things going on. One of the things that we've done at St. Thomas, we put a note out every week. It goes all over my Facebook page. It goes to the Dallas Community Board and all of the various groups in the state and nationally. And so I usually try to put a little teaser about what the service is going to be, and then I always sign it Father Fred, and that or that if I'm preaching, well, I mention that and mention our music director and everything. And so this last week, there was a note that somebody wrote saying that we should not use the title. In the Episcopal Church, we call our clergy Father Fred or Mother Susie or whatever. That's just what we do. And so we got a lecture from somebody telling us that you shouldn't use Father Fred and citing a biblical reference to back up the point and that sort of thing. So there's some ugliness going on right now, and you know, and I think we need to acknowledge it. I didn't respond to it, and I'm not going to, but you know, it's not just that. It's just happening.
Thank you. What I heard was that in some response to this particular banner was, well, you know, why aren't we celebrating white people?
Yeah.
You know, not their, you know, whatever. And it's like, which history do you want to celebrate? The false one or the real one?
Yeah.
And so that's a microaggression, and that is, you know, it's probably a micro invalidation. It's the same thing with Black Lives Matter, and then you say, well, Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. It's the same. It invalidates what the point is, right? So
I have another thing to add.
Yes,
Dallas may or may not be typical in this, but our small town has 6 different community bulletin boards that sort of vie with each other for, is it on this board it's safe to say anything? No, it's never safe. On this board you can say almost anything. On this board you'd better agree with them or be prepared for all kinds of flack. There are different versions and different reasons depending on who the administrators are. Well, if you're not using Facebook, you won't read it there. But if you're just having conversations with your friends and your family, if you're just paying, well, in these days you're probably not having coffee with anybody, but if you are listening to other people in this town, there will be people who are blatantly and usually using what my dad used to call cuss words. Sometimes it's micro and sometimes it's huge, but it's something as simple as putting up a banner for Black History Month. It must have triggered some people to come out of the woodwork and say on the screen things that they've longed to say, that they've long ago accepted as true. And now somebody else might say, I don't want to have a Facebook discussion with this person, so I'm just not going to say a word. But that's me. I'm not going to argue with anybody on Facebook, but I will read their comments and sigh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that aspect, you know, this is something we'll nibble on in spring term discussions about, just, you know, in our world and fake news and the use of technology and media today to spread hate and spread misinformation is an issue that's going to need to be addressed. And I think, you know, that's kind of what you're referring to. It's how it's being used to create arguments and to.
Last 2 nights ago, when we had our Friends of the Library annual meeting, one of the many, many things on the agenda was an acknowledgement that it had gotten complicated. You know, it wasn't originally the library that wanted to put this up, but it ended up being a good place, right downtown, right, quite visible. So anyway, Friends of the Library was the recipient, not the instigator, but the Friends of the Library were the recipient of the funds that were raised, because we're a nonprofit. And you know, when it comes down, it's March now, so I'm sure somebody will be taking the banner down.
It is down.
Okay, I haven't been in town, so I didn't know that. But anyway, my point is, it will be rolled up or folded up. It will be kept until next February. It will be put up again. And the Friends of the Library will be glad to play one small role. And it seems logical to me that the library would be a place to celebrate history.
Yeah.
Whether it be
Well, I think you got
one
in
group or
trouble.
another. Pardon?
I think y'all got in good trouble.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
trouble.
that's right. That's right.
That's right. That's right.
That's
Is that
right.
you, Darcy? Who said that?
Thank you.
Who said that?
Bobby.
Bobby, okay.
That's good, Bobby.
Yeah, that's a good one, Bobby. You're a historian. It's great. You're also a contemporary news person, which is great. I need to go back for just a moment here. Not everyone may know what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are, so I just want to make the point on this one is that it's a theory that for the human person to really thrive in life, they have certain needs that need to be met first before you really get up to life where you can really what they call self-actualizate, which means that you're just really flying, you know, in life and successful and you feel good and you've got success and power and all this. And it's hard for anyone to thrive or it's hard for anyone to really feel good and to live a healthy, whole life if you can't have the basic needs. So it does start, you know, you have to have food, you gotta have water, you gotta have shelter, you gotta be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water and all of this. And then it goes up to safety. You need to have security. You know, once you get your basic needs, then you've got to have your basic security needs taken care of. And that includes the ability to, you know, find a place to live, you're not on the street, and that you've got comfort and you feel safe. Because it's just like with our kids when they go to school, if they don't feel safe and they're hungry, it's really hard to learn. And it can just go the wrong direction from there. Next level, you got to have, once you get safety taken care of, then you need to have intimacy and you need to have connection with others. And this is in a COVID world right now, in quarantine world, you know, we see the value of that even more. It's hard to see and hug somebody. And I can't wait to go have, give a hug and have a cup of coffee with Fred and Lori. I just can't wait.
Yeah.
And, I filled out the list to be on the vaccine call list as soon as they call the last mile people. I'm in the last mile. I don't qualify for anything yet. I'm right in the middle. But anyways, I just can't wait. So then I can go and hug people again. So you got to have
Ask first.
Huh?
Ask first.
Yeah, ask first. That's right. And I'll have a mask on. I'll be okay. You know, it's okay. The mask deal to me is no big deal. I work in Asia all the time. We wear masks all the time. Esteem. So the next level, you know, so it's hierarchical, and you need to then get up to esteem, self-esteem, confidence, you know, how that feels, and achievement. I'm doing good things. I got into the college that I wanted, and you know, and with that, I've got the respect of my siblings and my mom and my dad and my friends. And then the next step up, you know, which is where you try to go. A lot of people, you know, esteem is pretty awesome, you know, but if you reach according to Maslow, the pinnacle would be just that you're just flying, you're self-actualizing, and you're just, you know, doing all this great stuff. The point is, using Maslow's hierarchy of needs in psychology, is it any wonder why, if persons of color are always aggressed and having these disses and all this, and insults, invalidations, sometimes assaults, any wonder why they struggle?
Yeah.
That's my point. And that's the theory behind the point. So I went a little fast on that. And one of my audience members sent me a little text, which I greatly appreciate.
Can I interject?
Of course.
I think the microaggression is almost under safety, isn't it? I mean, we constantly talk about poverty and trying to get them out of the physiological into the next level, but then they hit that wall of microaggression, which makes them so they don't feel safe.
Right.
And then that's where they get, I think a lot of times we put all our money to number one, but it's actually, they end up getting hung up on number two before they can move up. Because of the safety, a microaggression makes a person feel unsafe, I think. Just looking at this, I hadn't thought of it before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love it.
Greg, I think there's another thing too. I think a lot of what we're talking about is simply gets down to good manners.
All right.
Just imagine for a minute, we invite somebody over to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. We spend all day working on roasting, we'll say a goose, okay? And all the pies and everything that go with it. So your guests arrive and everybody's excited. You're worn out, but you're excited about the guests that are there. And the first thing when your friend walks in the door, they say, boy, I'm sure glad we're not having roast goose today. I can't stand it. You think about that. And what's the person, the host, going to do?
Right.
It's a manners thing. And it's the idea of coming up to somebody and saying, what, just because their shade is a little darker and that, well, so what nationality are you?
Oh yeah.
That's just bad manners.
Yeah.
Aside from everything else we've talked about.
Right. You're absolutely right, Fred. And it's about, that's why I started off saying, I think, in today's discussion, it's also about, I want you to think about just be humble and kind.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Oh, good manners. And but it also could put you in a position of being sensitive to what you say. Another class I taught on this recently on this subject was about, it's like people just don't want, well, I just won't say anything because I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong. And it's like, well, that's not the answer either. Because like today, when I said what I said, I thought, oh, that didn't probably, the person I was talking to was from Ghana. She's a PhD, doctor. I did a workshop this week with some folks in Houston, run a nonprofit, and they're from Pakistan, and they service the immigrant refugee community that come into Houston. And I was talking to my friend from Ghana and saying, you would probably really appreciate what I just did. They work with refugees. And that's where I'm thinking, is that a microaggression? I'm thinking, is she's going to appreciate something because of her race? Yeah. I felt, or maybe I'm being oversensitive. The good news is I thought about it like shortly after I said it. I thought, why do I think she would appreciate that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, why did I think that? So there I am, self-effacing on camera again. But yeah, so it makes you just be mindful. But I like what Fred said. It's about being really just good manners and stuff. But don't hesitate to talk. Just pause, reflect, and know we have biases which are grounded in our conditioning and our socialization. And that's where the demons are that trick us, and it causes us to kind of stumble like that. Because why did I think she would appreciate that over someone else? It's because she's from Ghana.
Yeah.
But your context was
I'm glad we have a priest in this conversation.
Right, that you had just done a workshop with refugees.
I did.
So
yeah.
But the other piece to this also, the whole micro stuff, and I really like that Bobby pointed that out, because I put that in my quote this week when I sent out the email. What Ibram says about that, it's not a micro at all.
Yeah,
is that we also have these micro socializations and these micro things going on that are just so much a part of our government and our society, whether it's inaccessible healthcare, whether it's inaccessible decent schools, whether it's inaccessible decent internet, and all that adds to placing certain peoples in a category. And it goes back to that opportunity, and it goes back to that. It's all interrelated.
Yep. Thank you, Laura.
All right. Thank you.
Did you all see the article with regard to the NFL?
Which one are you talking about, Yvette?
There was one that came out recently where there was a Black athlete trying to obtain some medical benefits, and that he was given less than a white person because they said the diminished mental capacity that he had was probably because he wasn't as smart as the white guy. That's why he couldn't receive as much. Did you guys see that?
No.
I didn't see it. No.
I will look for it and put it in our summary.
Yeah, because there was something, we were talking about how people of color are less intelligent than white people. So when you have the CTE and all the dementia and all those other things that they suffer from, the head blows, that you can't give him the same value as another because he's less than. And that again goes to the micro invalidation that you're referring to, because they figured he was less than, again, that he deserved less.
Right.
And that doesn't sound micro.
No, it doesn't. I'm with you. I really don't like the term. If I was, I haven't thought about it long enough, but I would come up with a different term. But and I think this is a nice segue to get to this here is what we've talked about as we've really defined it. I don't think anybody's really that jazzed with what the definition looks like. We've identified different types and the messages that they convey. We've nibbled on that. Good. And then the linkage between microaggressions and health. I would take the term away and think about it as being humble and kind, and not being rude, and having manners, and that, and being mindful of how we come across. And I think that's one of the other main threads I'd like to leave you with today is that. And then I want to ask you the question is, how do we override our microaggressions then? It's very similar to bias and implicit bias, where we, how do we override that? It's grounded deep, like bias is, in our persona. And so what do you think? If we just spend a few minutes on, well, how do we do it? I was going to go to a Jamboard, but what I might do is just have you just put in the chat box.
You want me to? Okay.
Put in the chat box, or can you see that, the Jamboard?
Do you want me to? Yeah, let me bring it up.
What are some of your ideas? Can you see that there though?
No.
Yes?
Can't see it.
Cannot see the Jamboard?
I guess
it says, I can see something that says jot our thoughts.
We're viewing your screen.
Okay. So
one of my ideas is like to the opposite of the golden rule.
Yeah.
Is that you're supposed to treat other people as you want to be treated. And I'm thinking of, are we supposed to write this?
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Treat other people as you want to be treated.
Treat other people as you want to be treated. Okay.
Right. And we've been like conditioned as to do that, but sometimes that doesn't work really well, because it's kind of like treat other people as they want to be treated. And some of that has to do with getting to know the person, the not assuming to, I went back to the woman that just reached out and wanted to touch a Black woman's hair, and how the woman pushed back, and not knowing enough about historically what that is all linked to. Right. And even though that person, white person, might be like, yay, touch my hair all day. It's like, no, that's how you want to be treated, not how other people want to be treated.
Right.
I want to mention something too. Thank you, Bobby. That was great. That I remembered when Yvette was talking. I watched, and I think some of you did, the program on Black athletes in Oregon who were in college, I think at the time. It was at the end of a year ago. And one of the football players caught my attention because he grew up in Prineville, and that's where I was born. And he said that when he played football, and he was like one of the only blacks in the whole high school. And when he played football on Friday night, everybody was cheering him because he was one of the really great athletes on the team. And then during the week, they ignored him. And there was some of, well, he's just black, he's a black kid. And then ignore him. And then the next Friday night would come along and they'd be cheering him again. And I'm thinking emotionally, what was that doing to that poor kid? He seemed like he had it together. And I think he was in college then. But, it's a mixed message thing. I guess that's what I'm saying. It was a mixed messages.
Well, the same thing that goes along with that, Father Fred, is that as a person, a black person, you got to learn to wear a mask. And that's
yeah.
You have to wear too many masks to fit every arena that you enter into, so that you're less offensive or less intimidating. And that's the part that is like, when can I be my true self, and when can I just be who I am without all the masks, so that you can be comfortable with who I am.
Yeah. Thank you, Yvette.
This is Darcy. I also think that we need to take time to listen and not be judgmental, and realize and talk to the people and find out about them instead of being so closed-minded. I think that's one of the key things is listening, and that care will come through, and they'll know you're sincere and that you're not fake and put on.
Very good. I agree.
Good, Darcy.
Robert.
One of my fallacies is, I guess, is women that are pregnant and I want to touch their stomach. And in my family, that was always considered a good thing. But when it became a stranger and they had different family ideas about this, it feels like the same thing. You have to talk to this person to find out where they're coming from before you get off base. But it just feels like one of the books we were reading said you can't be perfect, but you need to try to get through this, because if you try to be perfect, you won't say anything and you won't make any connections.
All right. Good. Anything else for our jotting our thoughts, scars of our heart? How do we kind of flatten out that paper?
I was kind of thinking when Robert was talking of that picture that's been out and about this week of Governor Cuomo with his hands on that woman's face at the wedding, and she's placed some charges against him. And I think perception is so important, and perception is also, I think, linked, as Darcy said, with kindness. And it's, I can't imagine, a good many years Adair worked for me when I was in the legislature, and even my wife, I can't imagine going up to her in a public setting and putting my hands on her face. I just wouldn't do that.
Right. Thank you. Treat the people the way we want to be treated. Be humble and kind. Closed-mindedness is not a good thing. Use manners. Be aware and thoughtful. Praise the wholeness of everyone. Get to know others that are different. Masks are really difficult to show your true self. Take time to listen. And we just heard on that, perception is everything.
I would like to add.
Go ahead, Carol.
Something that's very basic, but I mess up every day. Think before you talk.
Yeah, that's right.
Pause, reflect.
Think.
Carol, you're right. Well, it's like me today, though. I mean, although think before you talk. That's right. Pause, reflect, then respond.
I'd like to add, I was listening to Robert talk about the perfect, and I think forgive yourself and keep going. And if there is an opportunity to talk to that person, if you're close enough to that person to say, hey, want to do just a check, was that out of line or something like that? But at least if you don't feel like you can say that, at least be kind to yourself and keep working at making connections.
Thank you, Bobby. That's excellent. I need to close the Jamboard, and I need to close the discussion. So I will do that.
Good job, Greg.
Yeah, Greg.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Greg, can I toss in okay.
Yeah, let me close here, and then am I back on screen share there?
You are.
Okay.
Yeah.
We jotted our thoughts. We got some great thoughts on that board, and the beauty is we can keep it and use it as an attachment to our link for the work we did this week. How do we override? Think about it. Cultural competence and education is key, and that's why we're having these discussions every week. And in our daily living, it's about having high self-awareness of yourself racially, culturally, aware of your biases, stereotypes, and assumptions that create our world view, right? And understand and learn the world view of other culturally diverse people. So it starts with us first, self-recognition, awareness, and then go out and explore this richness in the world that we see. And remember to always be humble and kind. Hang on. Everywhere we go.